I didn't expect to fall for Ethan. He wasn't the type of guy I usually found myself drawn to, calm, measured, and almost unnervingly kind. But maybe that was why I needed him. My life had been a mess of unpredictability, full of false starts and abrupt endings, and Ethan felt like an anchor. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party 6 months ago. I remember the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled and how, despite the loud conversations swirling around us, he seemed fully focused on me. "Lena," he had said, testing my name on his tongue like it was a song lyric he wanted to remember. "You're different." Different how? I'd asked, my curiosity piqued. In a good way. It wasn't the most original answer, but something about the way he said it made my chest flutter. From that night on, we became inseparable. Ethan had this way of making everything seem lighter, easier. He didn't flinch when I told him about my estranged parents or my fear of deep water. Nor did he laugh when I admitted I'd always wanted to learn how to bake, but was terrible at it. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves one weekend and spent hours with me in his kitchen, teaching me how to make something as simple as chocolate chip cookies. "You're burning this batch on purpose," he teased as the kitchen filled with smoke. "Maybe I like them crispy," I shot back, grinning as he opened the window to let the smoke out. It wasn't long before we decided to move in together. It made sense, we spent so much time at each other's places anyway. And I was tired of lugging my overnight bag back and forth. Ethan found the house. It was a charming little place on the edge of town, with ivy creeping up the sides and a small garden out back. "It's perfect for us," he said, his hand resting lightly on my back as we toured the property. And it was. At least, it seemed that way at first. The dream started a few weeks after we moved in. At first, they were fragmented, flashes of water rippling under a pale moon, the sensation of cold hands gripping my wrists, and a voice whispering my name. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, but Ethan would always be there to calm me down. "Just a bad dream," he'd murmur, pulling me into his arms. "It's not real, Lena. I'm here." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the dreams grew more vivid. In them, I was standing on the edge of a dark river. My reflection in the water stared back at me, but something about it felt wrong. The woman in the reflection was me, but not me. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her lips moved as if she were trying to warn me of something. Then out of nowhere, a shadowy figure would appear behind her, behind me. Before I could turn around, hands would shove me forward, and I'd plunge into the icy water. Every time I woke up gasping for air, my throat raw as if I'd actually been screaming. Ethan grew increasingly worried. "Maybe we should see someone about this," he suggested one morning, his face etched with concern. "I'm fine," I insisted, though the dark circles under my eyes told a different story. "It's just stress. Moving in together, settling into a new place, it's a lot." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push the issue. I started to notice other things too small, almost imperceptible oddities that I couldn't explain. Sometimes, I'd find myself standing in front of the river a few miles from our house, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Other times, I'd catch Ethan staring at me, a strange expression on his face, as if he were seeing someone else entirely. "What?" I'd ask, trying to laugh it off. "Nothing," he'd reply quickly, but the look would linger. One night, after another vivid dream, I decided to confront him. "Ethan," I said as we sat in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows across his face. "Is there something you're not telling me?" He looked startled. "What do you mean?" "The dreams. The way you've been looking at me lately. It's like you know something and you're not saying it." He hesitated, his fingers tapping nervously against the armrest of the couch. "Lena," he began slowly, "sometimes dreams are just dreams. They don't mean anything." "That's not an answer," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what you want me to say." "The truth," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "There's nothing to tell," he insisted, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. Frustrated, I dropped the subject, but deep down I knew he was lying. The next day, while Ethan was at work, I decided to do a little digging of my own. I started with the house, searching every nook and cranny for something, anything, that might explain the dreams. That was when I found the box. It was tucked away in the attic, hidden beneath an old blanket. Inside were photographs, letters, and a faded journal. The photographs stopped me cold. There, staring back at me, was a woman who looked exactly like me. Same dark hair, same sharp cheekbones, same haunted eyes. But it wasn't me. Her name, scrawled on the back of one of the photographs, was Emily. I stared at the photograph for what felt like hours, my hands trembling. Emily? Who was she? And why did she look exactly like me? The box held more than just photographs. There were letters, some faded and torn, all addressed to Emily. Most were signed with a simple E, though the handwriting didn't match Ethan's neat script. And then there was the journal, its leather cover worn, the edges brittle with age. I flipped it open cautiously. The handwriting was delicate, slanted, and familiar in a way that made my stomach churn. June 12. I met someone today. His name is Ethan, and he's different, kind, gentle. He makes me feel like the world isn't such a scary place after all. For the first time in years, I think I might trust someone again. My breath caught in my throat. Emily had written about Ethan. I turned the page, my eyes devouring every word. July 3rd. Ethan and I went to the river today. There's something about the water that terrifies me, but he promised he'd keep me safe. He always knows the right thing to say. I think I'm falling for him. I paused, my heart pounding. The river. The same river that haunted my dreams. I skimmed through the entries, each one painting a picture of a relationship that was eerily similar to mine and Ethan's. The way they met, the way he made her feel safe, it was all too familiar. And then, the entries took a darker turn. August 14th. There's something Ethan isn't telling me. He's been acting strange, distant. Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he's searching for someone else. I asked him about it, but he just brushed it off. I want to believe him, but something doesn't feel right. September 1st. I found a letter today. It was from a man claiming to know me, really know me. He said my name isn't Emily, that I've been living a lie my whole life. I don't know what to think. Is it true? If it is, why hasn't Ethan told me? I flipped to the last entry, my hands shaking. September 10th. I'm going to confront him tonight. I need to know the truth. If he's been lying to me, I can't stay. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. The river scares me, but the lies scare me more. The entry ended there. The page smudged as though her pen had faltered mid-sentence. I closed the journal, my heart racing. Emily had disappeared. That much was clear. But Ethan had never mentioned her. Never even hinted that someone like her had existed. Why? And why did she look exactly like me? Ethan came home later that evening, his usual warm smile faltering when he saw me sitting at the dining table, the box laid out in front of me. "Lena," he said cautiously, his eyes darting to the journal in my hands. "What's this?" "You tell me," I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "Who is Emily?" His face paled. "Where did you find that? Does it matter?" I shot back, standing up. "Why didn't you tell me about her? And why does she look like me?" Ethan took a step closer, but I held up a hand to stop him. "Don't," I said sharply. "I need answers, Ethan. No more lies." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling. "She was someone I loved. A long time ago." I crossed my arms, unwilling to let him off that easily. And she disappeared," he admitted. "No one knows what happened to her. One day she was just gone. Gone." I repeated, my voice rising. "That's it? She just vanished, and you never thought to mention her to me? Or the fact that she looks exactly like me?" Ethan flinched at the accusation in my tone. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said quietly. "I didn't want to scare you." "Well, guess what? I'm already scared," I snapped, holding up the journal. "I've been having these dreams, these nightmares about being pushed into a river. And now I find out that the river you take me to all the time is the same one Emily was terrified of? Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" Ethan reached out, his voice desperate. "Lena, please. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. For a moment I thought he was going to confess something, but instead he shook his head. "I need you to trust me. I laughed bitterly. Trust you? After this. I gestured to the box. You've been lying to me this whole time. I don't even know who you are anymore. Ethan's face fell. And for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. I never lied about how I feel about you, he said softly. Everything I've done, everything I've kept from you, it was to protect you. Protect me from what? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, clutching Emily's journal like a lifeline. I spent the rest of the night going through the box, searching for clues that might help me piece together what had happened to Emily. The more I read, the more questions I had. Who was the man who had written to her, claiming she wasn't really Emily? And what did he mean about her living a lie? And, most importantly, what did Ethan have to do with any of it? By the time the sun began to rise, I had made up my mind. If Ethan wasn't going to give me answers, I would find them myself. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back at the river, drowning, gasping for air. Emily's voice echoed in my head, and I was convinced she was trying to tell me something important. I had to understand what had happened to her, and why it felt like her fate was intertwined with mine. The next morning, I woke up early, the weight of my thoughts pressing heavily on my chest. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I needed to see the river, the same one that had haunted my dreams and apparently Emily's. I didn't tell Ethan where I was going. The thought of facing him again, after the confrontation the night before, made me feel like I was suffocating. The river was quiet when I arrived, its surface still and undisturbed. I stood at the edge, staring down at the dark water, the sun casting long shadows over the banks. It was hard to imagine that anyone could disappear here, that anything sinister could happen in a place so peaceful. But Emily had been terrified of it, and now I understood why. I walked along the water's edge, the cold wind brushing against my skin, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. I needed to think clearly. There had to be something, some detail that would help me make sense of everything. And then I saw it. A small, weathered piece of paper was caught between the rocks along the shore, half submerged in the water. I reached down and pulled it out, my hands shaking as I unfolded it. It was a letter. The handwriting was familiar, Ethan's. Lena, it began. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but if you do, I need you to understand something. The truth about Emily, about me, is complicated. I never wanted you to know about her. But I can't keep lying to you. The woman you think you are, that's not your real identity. You're not Lena. You're Emily's sister. Your real name is Haley. My heart stopped. The words blurred in front of my eyes, and I had to reread them several times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't Lena. I wasn't me. I was Haley. The letter continued. I know this sounds insane, but I promise you it's the truth. When you were babies, your parents, they switched you and Emily. They thought they could erase everything, bury the past. But the truth always comes to light. You're Emily's twin sister. And she's gone because of me, because I loved her in a way that I shouldn't have. Felt dizzy. Like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. How was this possible? How had I never known? There was more. Emily found out the truth. She remembered. She confronted me, and I couldn't let her go. I couldn't let anyone find out. But when she tried to run, I couldn't stop her. She fell into the river. She didn't drown, though. She was murdered. And it wasn't me, Haley. It wasn't me who did it. It was your father. He knew the secret, and he couldn't let Emily live. He had to silence her. The letter ended there, the words trailing off into a blur of ink. I stood frozen, the letter crumpled in my hand. My father had murdered Emily. And I wasn't even who I thought I was. I didn't know how long I stood there trying to process what I had just read. My head felt like it was spinning, and my chest ached with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and something darker, guilt. When I finally managed to pull myself together, I left the river. I didn't know where to go, but I had to find answers. I couldn't let this go. I couldn't go back to Ethan without understanding everything. I drove to the only place I could think of. My father's house. It was a large, imposing place, nestled on the outskirts of town. A mansion, really. My father had always been a man of power, wealth, and influence. And I had been raised to believe in the family name above all else. But now everything felt like a lie. I parked in front of the house and sat there for a few moments, trying to gather my thoughts. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the fear creeping up on me. What was I going to say to him? I had to know the truth. I walked up to the door and rang the bell, my hand shaking. A few moments later the door opened and there he was. My father. He was older than I remembered, his hair now silver, his face etched with lines of age and stress. But his eyes, the same cold, calculating eyes, were still the same. "Haley," he said, his voice cool but laced with something else. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed hard. "I need to talk to you. It's important." His eyes narrowed. "This isn't the time, Haley. Whatever it is, it can wait." "No," I said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "It can't wait." He didn't move to stop me, but his expression darkened. "What's this about?" "About Emily," I said, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. "About who I really am." My father's face went pale, and for a moment, I thought he might actually break. But then he composed himself, his mask slipping back into place. "Emily is gone," he said, his voice cold. "It's time you let her go too. Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice shaking with the force of the words. "Tell me what happened to her. Why you killed her." His eyes flickered, and for a brief second, I saw something that looked almost like regret. But it was gone in an instant. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I had no choice. No choice." I repeated. "You had a choice. And you made the wrong one. You killed your own daughter. You killed Emily. You don't know what it was like," he said, his voice strained. "You don't understand what we were protecting." I took a step forward. "Tell me." And for the first time in my life, I saw my father's facade crack. "There's a secret," he whispered, his voice trembling. "A secret that could ruin everything. Emily found out about it. And she would have told the world. I couldn't let that happen. Tell me what it is," I demanded, my heart racing. "Tell me, or I swear, I'll make you tell me." As if he could no longer hold back the truth, he whispered, "You're not my daughter, Haley. You never were. You're Emily's twin. And Emily knew it." I felt like the floor had just fallen out beneath me. I stared at my father, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Consequences. The word echoed in my head, a warning, a threat, a promise. What had I gotten myself into? What was the truth that I couldn't walk away from? For a moment, the silence between us was thick, suffocating. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything he had told me. The secret society. My father spoke again, his voice low and strained. "You have to understand, Haley. There are people who will stop at nothing to make sure this secret stays buried. The society we were a part of, they don't just protect legacies, they control them. And once someone like you, someone with a bloodline like yours, becomes a target, there's no going back." "You're telling me this like it's all some grand conspiracy," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "But all I've learned is that I've been living a lie. You killed Emily to keep your secret safe. You swapped us when we were babies. And now you're telling me I'm in danger because of something I didn't even ask for." His expression hardened. "It's not that simple, Haley. There are forces at play here that you can't even begin to comprehend. Emily was close to uncovering something that would have exposed everything. If she had lived, she would have destroyed everything we built. Everything your mother and I worked for. And now, with you knowing the truth, you're in the same danger." I shook my head, my thoughts swirling. "I don't care about your legacy. I don't care about your society or whatever this is. I just want to know what happened to Emily. I need to know why she had to die." My father's eyes flickered with a dark shadow of guilt, but he didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was quiet, almost regretful. "Emily knew too much. She had the power to bring everything to light. She was meant to be part of something bigger, but she was too weak to understand the consequences. She didn't have the strength to bear the truth." "And you think I do?" I spat, stepping back, my hands shaking at my sides. "You think I can just accept all of this, and keep quiet like you did?" He didn't answer, his eyes avoiding mine, looking somewhere far away. "You're asking me to protect your secret, to live in the shadows like you did," I continued, my voice rising with anger. "But I won't. I won't keep this to myself. I'll expose everything, even if it means bringing down your entire world. My father's face twisted into something dark, something cold. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You don't understand what you're threatening, Haley. This is bigger than just you. If you try to expose this, you'll be marked for death. They'll come after you. And I won't be able to protect you anymore. I stood my ground, refusing to let his words break me. I don't care. I'm done living in your world of lies. I'm done being a pawn in your game. His eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're saying. I turned away from him, unable to look at him anymore. I know enough. I know that you killed Emily to keep your secret safe. And now, you're trying to control me too. You're not going to win. I won't let you. I walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But as I reached for the handle, I heard him speak again. His voice low and urgent. Haley, you're making a mistake. I stopped, my hand hovering over the door. It's not a mistake, I said quietly. It's the truth. And with that, I walked out of the house. The world outside felt strangely different, like the air had shifted in some unspoken way. I couldn't explain it, but I knew I had made the right decision. I couldn't go back to the life I had known. The lies, the secrets, the darkness, they were all too much to bear. As I drove away from my father's house, I felt like I was leaving behind a part of myself. But in its place, I felt a new strength, a sense of resolve that I hadn't had before. I didn't know what the future held, or how I was going to expose the truth. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let the society, or my father, get away with what they had done. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, interrupting my thoughts. I glanced at it, seeing Ethan's name flash across the screen. For a moment I hesitated, my finger hovering over the green button. What could I possibly say to him after everything that had happened? After everything I had learned? I answered the call. Ethan. Haley. His voice was strained, filled with an emotion I couldn't place. Are you okay? I sighed, the weight of everything pressing down on me again. No, Ethan. I'm not okay. I'm sorry, he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. I never meant for you to get caught up in this. I never meant to hurt you. I closed my eyes, the pain from everything I had discovered still raw. I know you didn't, but the truth changes everything. Let me help you, he said quickly, his voice filled with urgency. You don't have to face this alone. I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. I can't trust anyone anymore, Ethan. Not even you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally he spoke again, his voice softer, almost resigned. I understand. I hung up. The weight of the silence settling over me. There was no going back. No undoing what had been done. But the truth had been set in motion, and I couldn't stop now. As I drove into the night, I knew that my life would never be the same. But at least it would be my life, no longer controlled by the lies of the past. I wasn't sure what was waiting for me ahead. But one thing was certain, I was ready to face it.